Hello, good evening, and welcome back. So it's not the first time, and unfortunately, I doubt it's going to be the last time, but another Rochdale child grooming gang member is spotted in town, just buying groceries, carrying a takeaway, doing regular day-to-day stuff. And of course, this is years after they should have been deported. They had their 6 to 9 years jail sentence, which isn't nearly enough for what they did, but nonetheless, if they are going to be deported, so they are no longer a part of our society, then so be it. If it's such a long waiting list that it requires them to be jailed for so long, then we will regrettably and reluctantly accept that punishment for the rest of us, that we actually have to pay for their existence for the next few years until we can get rid of them. But if that is necessary, then so be it. That's going to be accepted, and then we can remove them. Yep. Except no, apparently that's not the case. As we see here, Abdul Ralph, probably not the correct pronunciation, and I also don't care. I've got no respect for him whatsoever. Who has been seen in Rochdale again. It's not as if they're going to move out from where they seem to have been suggested that it's actually acceptable to do what they're doing. Bear in mind, when we're talking about rape, just regular rape, that carries a greater prison sentence. But if you are responsible for being part of a grooming gang, which I think is too nice of a phrasing, let's actually just go back to what it actually is. That if you are somebody who operates with a gang of other men and targets and rapes young girls, whether that be prepubescent or postpubescent, even if it's pederasty, don't really give a shit here. But this is to do with the rape of innocent, naive girls, passing them around for group rape, then I would suggest 6 to 9 years compared with, up to 25 years for just regular adult one-on-one rape, then that isn't really sufficient. But of course, they get a pass because they're not British. And, instead of any sensible country which actually tries to protect its own citizens from foreign threats, the British Conservative government decides, instead let's placate them. They're Pakistani, of course, and they're a good voter bloc for the opposition. So I have absolutely no clue as to why they might be doing this. I mean, who are they supposed to be appealing to here? So sure, they're appealing to Pakistani members and other rapists, other Muslims, there we go, but I repeat myself, and the radical left, who are never going to vote for them anyway. So what exactly is the point here? As far as I can see, there is no rhyme and reason whatsoever in order to placate these people. The only possibility, if you wish to get tinfoil hat wearing, is we can't clog up prisons with actual criminals, because we have to leave space for political dissidents and people who post subversive memes and jokes on the internet and might spread ideas that would run counter to what the unified political class, the Uniparty, is trying to achieve. And anything that spreads the idea of individualism and personal responsibility has to be scrubbed, because otherwise you might get the radical notion that you can actually live your life a lot better without government interfering. Without, even in the best case scenario, the mob mentality of the majority dictating the rights of the minority. Yeah, and the rest of us might get the idea, we don't actually need that to be the case. We can form voluntary associations and be getting on just fine, and this whole thing seems largely unnecessary. And of course, the second that happens, the entire idea of democracy it has become to be known, or just voting, or just government as a whole, is thrown out the window. So that is my 2 cents as to why they might actually be ignoring, or worst case, actively encouraging such rapists to continue to roam the streets. But let me know your thoughts down below. So In response, fresh calls have been made to deport members of a notorious grooming gang after one of the men was spotted in the town where he abused young girls more than a decade ago. To me, this is rapidly getting to the point at which these fresh calls to the government doesn't really do justice. And, of course, I'm going to actively avoid inciting violence on the internet. That's clearly a dreadful thing. Instead, I am going to appeal to base principles, which is to say to put yourself in the position of the victim or a family member of the victim or somebody who simply cares for said victim. So, you are aware of somebody who has suffered this horrendous ordeal. You are, of course, forced at gunpoint, near enough, to support the law of the land and the government that is enacting and forcing their policies upon the rest of us. And you reluctantly agree, going along with the idea that, taxes are a necessary evil and they provide services for the rest of us and it's economies of scale and therefore that is the best way to do it, which I think is largely fallible. But nonetheless, let's say you go along with it and say it's a requirement for a civilized society. And then you see a failing. Not just a minor failing, not just the idea of that pothole hasn't been filled for a few months now. No. Instead, that man who that we were assured would no longer be a part of our society one way or another is just there. And of course, if I'm aware that he's there, despite having absolutely no information given from victim support services or the police, then it's fair to say that quite a few other people know that he's there. In which case, other people of the same Islamic ideology as him know that he is there. This seems to be providing the message that raping non-Islamic girls, particularly British girls, but it isn't just British, let's be frank, it's non-Islamic girls. That those other rapists understand that there seems to be a tolerated part of our society. And I don't quite agree with that. That's gone to an unacceptable level. In which case, if the legal system, if the government isn't doing what they are supposed to do, then I see no other option but to do it myself. And of course, that is a perfectly salient, reasonable, and acceptable argument. You can't really argue with that. And of course, runs completely counter to the idea of the government in the first place in enacting laws. And the idea of these laws is to prevent vigilante justice from occurring. The idea is that you then accept that the law of the land will do its job in order to enact justice, and you do not have to take that responsibility upon yourself. But if they're not doing that anywhere near the level that is acceptable to any moral person, then of course you're going to feel inclined to do it yourself. And what happens then? Well, on a small scale, of course, then the police get involved and arrest the victim for aggravated assault, for trying to deal the justice that wasn't initially available. Bear in mind, this isn't the first time that they would have done this, because historically, as we know, once a parent of a rape victim becomes aware of their daughter's situation, then the police bring out a restraining order against the parent in order to prevent them from gaining access to their daughter. And the rape gang, so I refuse to call them grooming gangs, will move them to another part of the country so that the parent has no idea as to where they are. And the police will actively facilitate this, as is well documented at this point. So seeing as that, trying to imprison the parent for aggravated assault isn't the first time that they would have prevented this. That's what happens on a small scale. But of course, these things don't happen in a vacuum. Instead, they're a much larger part, and at this point, they are a part of our national ethos, that we are actually aware that this is happening. And this isn't going to go down very well. We all know that the people are quick to riot over suicide of a black man because a policeman is present, and you can pick a multitude of examples from there, but George Floyd is simply one of a black man killing himself, and a policeman is present and tries to resuscitate him, but fails to do so. And of course we see billions of dollars of damage in America, and then it, for some reason, comes across the pond, even though the standard of unarmed black men dying in police custody is still lower than proportional. But nonetheless, who cares for evidence? And this is rioting that is happening, obviously, very readily then, with absolutely no standing whatsoever. And, of course, these are the same people who don't understand personal responsibility, quite conveniently for the powers that be, given that they have no idea how to fight or defend themselves because they haven't actually taken any courses or of any knowledge in the endeavour. Whereas one of the main differences between the right and the left is that the left doesn't seem to know how to fight, whereas the right does. The right seems to be far more experienced in such an endeavour. They're the ones that would have taken on things in order to be more personally accountable and be able to defend themselves, their friends and their family. And so when you get these kinds of people forming a riot instead, that's when it becomes far more of a headache for the powers that be. As an example, to a much lesser extent, you can compare the IRA to Antifa. And who was more of a concern? Obviously the IRA. Who were the IRA? Nationalists. So, drawing those parallels, and trust me, that is the only parallel that I wish to draw, but nonetheless, drawing those parallels, you can well imagine how quickly this could get out of hand. And therefore, with the Conservative government supposedly deporting criminals, lessening legal immigration and preventing illegal immigration, they're clearly not doing this. Immigration, both legal and illegal, only seems to be on the uptick under the Conservatives, and they're clearly not doing the far easier job of deporting known criminals while they've had about a decade in order to do it. And with all these things, you've got to remember that if this is one that has been publicly reported, how many others are there that have not been publicly reported, but yet still, of course, out there? So, by all means, you've said that the trio of those three rapists have been facing deportation since 2018 after losing an appeal to retain their British citizenship. Why are they still here 3 years later? As MP Tony Lloyd said, the government has shown grossly unacceptable inaction, and that the Home Office said the men's case has recently been reviewed and it intends to update the victims through the proper channels when they can. Well, they clearly haven't. At all. At all. And Mr. Lloyd, who is Rochdale's Labour MP, so one of the men who facilitated this happening in the first place in order to stop accusations of racism, as in actively prevented police from investigating the rapists because they're Pakistani, said it was unthinkable that the men's victims still face the possibility of walking around a street corner and bumping into them. Oh well, times have changed. You were fine with this before, but now you can blame the Conservatives. You wish to be all high and mighty. You can fuck off. But he goes on. particularly as we've had promises from successive Home Secretaries, not just in recent months, but over a good number of years now. Quite frankly, the inaction by the government is unthinkable and grossly unacceptable. 2 can play that game, Tony. Would you like to suggest that the raping of young girls in your constituency has all finished now, and there is no prevention of investigation over concerns of being branded a racist, and you're definitely not preventing investigations from happening, which would be inaction that is unthinkable and grossly unacceptable, as it's not just in recent months but over a good number of years now? And of course we've had promises. So, do you think there's a bit of a double standard of play here? And let's be frank, who does he think is actually going to believe this? I don't think any of us are believing this, that, yes, there was a scandal, but it was over a short time period, and it's all over now. Definitely. Wow. I wish I was so naive and innocent, but unfortunately, my youth is gone, and I've grown cynical in my older age. But there's one thing of not trusting MPs, and there's quite another of not trusting Labour MPs. So, would you like to reconsider, Tony? Or are you just going to come in a few years when there's yet another scandal that's continued ongoing under your leadership and under your purview, and gone, I had no idea, there was nothing I could do, but I will keep collecting that pension. Thank you very much. Because I think we all know that's what's going on here. So the call to action I would give to you is not to enact violence, of course. No aggravated assault. Is just the regular, traditional, legal self-defense to train any would-be victims about how to defend themselves as well, regardless of the ethnicity of the attackers, even though we kind of know who it's going to be. And continue to spread the word and get this well known in order to try and enlighten people as to the problems that they face due to conflict theory within their own constituencies, and perhaps make enough noise in order for change to be enacted, not just by voting for change, as the saying goes, but actually shifting the Overton window in order to ensure that it becomes such a big issue as it bloody well should be. Because what kind of country have you got if your young girls are just tributes to be paid to the invading force as sex slaves, as is essentially happening here? Let's not forget that is what Muhammad taught as well, the prophet, that after you invade a place and beat them at war, then you take their women and girls as sex slaves. He himself participating in that with a plurality of so-called wives, and bathing once in a night between having sex with all of them. What a role model. Clearly a true prophet. If only I had a drawing and diagram to go along with this. But to shift the Overton window enough to say, yeah, this is actually one of our key points, and we didn't think it would ever get to this point in such a refined country such as Britain. But it has, in which case we're going to have to go back to base principles in order to ensure that this is stopped and doesn't happen again. And we do not give a shit as to whether or not we're called racist by acknowledging that there seems to be an ideological problem caused by Islam, and therefore we're going to put a stop to it right here and now. That is my call to action to you. But let me know what you guys think down below. Do you think, no, it actually definitely is over now and we don't need to worry about it anymore? Or do you think there was a better way of fixing it? Either way, let me know down below. Always intrigued to what you guys have to say. And of course, as always, until next time, have a good one.